Dear colleagues, dear friends, in the framework of our Gaidar Forum, today we have a session dedicated to the work of the expert board, which was instituted by decree of the Russian government issued on December 23. The government has formed the expert board, enrolled the experts, and since our forum, it's not an investment forum, it's not an economic forum, it's an expert forum. We have here experts working with the government, we have government working with experts, so we decided to have this expert discussion about expert work in Russia. And I think this is very much in line with the 30th anniversary of radical economic reforms, because a lot of expert work was invested into that reform. We have members of the expert board present at our discussion. It's the Russian government expert board, and let me introduce to you coordinator of the expert board, Yaroslav Kuzminov, from the Higher School of Economics. We do not have a formal moderator. Everyone's here to discuss, and someone's going just to check the timing. I think the coordinator of our expert board should be our moderator. Thank you very much. It's good that I have my watch on, so I'm going to watch that we all stick to our timing. You are right that expert work, expert activities in Russia, this is a very interesting topic for discussion per se, because if we look at the history of the young Russian state, in its new incarnation, which started in 1991, then we will see that there were very clear-cut stages of expert work. The first stage was till 1993-94, when everyone was carried away by the happenings. Everyone saw there were so many people creating problems, experts creating problems, and you know, that kind of thing was very close to me, like Leonid Abalkin, Shmelev, serious economists of those times. They communicated with the public, and via communication with the public, they influenced the governmental policy. Then a new stage started, financial institutions appeared in Russia, so at that stage, we very much trusted foreign financial experts, and they actually design the politics of the government. So, like, you know, what was good for the Latin American countries should be okay for Russia. Well, no offense, but this is the way it was. And it's evident that the stage was the stage of foreign experts' influence on our policy, and formal expert evaluation, it was gone. Not even in Russian regions it was present anymore, because the World Bank or IMF experts, they were omnipresent in any most remote part of our country. At the end of 1990s, if we take the economic development model, or more precisely the decision-making model based on foreign experts' appraisal, was gone, and a number of experts, they made their conclusions for the Primakov's government, for other governments, and for Putin, as Putin's government as well. And it's not just the high higher school of economics. I always said, and I'm saying now, that we have to use our own brains to manage our country. And this new wave started, the new wave and the new stage of new Russian national expert evaluation. We got different consumers of expert services because business community was attracting the Big Four and other international companies like McKinsey and the likes, very expensive consultants who continued to be based on international experience. And I think that the business community till 2015 approximately was fully under the influence of those consultants and companies. But then some part of expert evaluation work, which was most independent, like expert evaluation of scientific institutions, of educational institutions, and so on. And we have here the heads of largest centers who participated in this process. It's Kurchatov Institute, RANEPA, the Higher School of Economics, represented by Alexander Shokhin, and several lines of this expertise, of this expert work, they evolved in a very interesting way. A group of experts stood out, those who justified any conclusion the employer wanted to see in the expert appraisal, who worked on order. At that time, if you remember, we had a very extensive board, expert board of Russian government. There were about 400 experts in it. And at that time, there was a big temptation because expert appraisal was either servicing or lobbying someone's interests. Those who ordered and paid for the expert evaluation. So now I'm talking about a completely different expert board, a completely different terms of reference for the expert work. And I would suggest, colleagues, we share our opinion about the current status and characteristics of expert evaluation. What are the current trends in it? How do young experts differ from 60-plus experts? Vladimir, what about you? Vladimir Mao. Thank you. You know, expert evaluation has undergone serious evolution, and I would not underestimate the expert work in 1990s. My experience shows that the role of foreign experts was minimal. Our main task was to get access to the wealth of international experience, because we knew there was a wealth of experience which did not really meet the goals and tasks of the Soviet times economy. But in 1990s, we wanted to learn international experience, and that was their role. And what's interesting, over the past 30 years, expert work is very much demanded. Experts come to work in the government. The government wants experts to help them. And, you know, this is a very big achievement of the past 30 years. In Soviet times, we had a phrase saying a good economic experts' work was actually resigned to the role of servicing the interests of the employer, the interests of those who order expert evaluation. And this is no good, we understand, and that's why we wanted alternative system. There are two important differences. If we take the first 10 years of this period, an expert should not consider himself to be a politician. An expert is not going to tell the politician what the politician is supposed to do or decide. But political activities, they are completely different from expert work. It has other challenges and other goals. So the first idea is that an expert should be an honest person, but not a politician. The expert's role is to explain all the existing alternatives, all the pros and cons of every situation. And then don't forget, there are two types of intellectual expert work. One is when an expert analyzes different options and suggests different options of solutions, knowing that there are several solutions. Very rarely there is only one correct solution. Usually it means that the experts haven't analyzed other possible solutions to the problem. And the second option is, well, a consultant, which well, don't forget, a consultant is an expert. You are describing a consultant the right way. The consultants are the lucky experts who work for the ones who pay them. An expert should analyze the options and show all the pros and cons and tell the employer, now it's up to you to make a decision. This is how an expert should work. Alexander, I think you have the biggest experience of being both an expert, an employer, and a civilized lobbyist. Where is the boundary between consulting, expert work, and lobbying? We can say these are different things, but then we will not be able to master the situation. Do we have to consider these three things separately, or should we unite them? Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to this very interesting session, and special respect and thanks to Vladimir Mao for the invitation. You know, I will not quite agree, first of all, with the staging. In late 1980s, scientific expert opinion was of much value. In Gorbachev times, I worked in the Forecasting Institute, before that in the Mathematics Institute. All of those experts, biggest experts like Abalkin, Petrakov, Shatalin, they worked in the Presidential Council, they worked in the government, so they acted as consultants and also as experts. But that expert evaluation was individualized, and on the other hand, they represented scientific institutions. And the last years I worked in science, I analyzed I worked on a document in which we described the period till 2005. It was socialism with a human face. When revolution of 1991 happened, the nature of expert work changed a bit, and the academicians then they were hurt. They thought that we did not invite them as much as they wanted to. When I became Minister of Economy and I invited the academician Shatalin and other colleagues, and in the Ministry of Economy I created a scientific expert board. These experts, they were real happy because they saw that we really needed them again. Even though we didn't need that many experts, but we wanted to open a good dialogue with the public, with the society, because that was a turning point in different stages of expert work. So if we try to distinguish lobbying from expert work. I've been heading the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs for many years, and we understand very well that any international company can lobby its interests, approaching ministries, governmental agencies, parliament members or government members and other institutions, decision-making institutions. But we always were for having corporate, individualized platforms for lobbying interests where they could clash and fight.
And our organization always fixed that the position of our chamber is the position which is supported by our higher body, the board of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. And it is then rolled out for other committees and members of our SPP. And then we place it as a position of the business community. It means that the expert evaluation, which is wrapped in the format of an institutional lobbyism, is considered as quite adequate for us and relevant, because any institution making decision understands what are the interests and who is behind those interests. We cannot set a task. The policy is policy. Our decision should not be the only one and only correct. But we fix our point of view, and we are doing our best to get to a compromise. And it's clear that sometimes such formalized institutions work very well. For example, the evaluation of a regulator influence, when every law evaluation is published, in business and other professional communities, organizations, non-commercial organizations, and separate experts, individuals are able to express their opinion about this law or draft law or instruction draft, executive order of an agency. They can express their opinion. And again, by fixing our point of view, we as a business, we don't have no guarantees that it's going to be taken into account. But anyway, this is the prerogative of the government to make these decisions. Another thing is when the decision is made and after its implementation, we see that the business was right, we can have a follow-up corrections and adjustment. And I think it's okay. Expert evaluation combined with public and transparent lobbying is okay. The most thing is to show who is lobbying what. If it's done under the table, under the carpet, it's not good. If the lobbying is serving the interests of certain corporations or group or even industry to the detriment of others. So this situation is absolutely pure lobbying, and the expert evaluation has already a supplementary task to justify position of those corporations or groups. That's why, we really order expert evaluation in good expert centers, understanding that business needs a high-level expert evaluation. They increase their stakes. You know, we are servicing government. We have a lot of requests. Please multiply it by 2, by 4, by 8, and we're going to make a good evaluation, a good for you. But that is already like pay us more and we will write what you want to. That's another story. We should keep the balance here between the independence and unbiased of the expert institution, which does this job, and the ability and their desire to earn some more money to avoid it. Well, we should have this balance, and we should have the second opinion here to provide proper interaction between business and expert community. I believe that the government is concerned by the topic which we are discussing here, since there is a huge experience of different combinations of expert work, lobbying, consulting, counseling, consulting in the sense of developing some of the topic which the client wants to. And the approach, which was proposed by the Prime Minister, he realized very narrow expert council of 23 people. Each of them does not need this platform, this structure to say something and to be heard by the government and by the management. Well, and that's another approach which could be, and another approach is that every member of the experts committee, or either RSPP, Kurchatov Institute, or Rostelecom, or Sberbank, they are acting on behalf of a big team of those experts. They can collect those experts and work on their behalf. And all those teams and people, they have their own interests, but they state them different way. An expert and the membership and expert council committee will not add anything to the lobbying abilities of those organizations. That was the idea, in my opinion. I would like to discuss the following topic. Mikhail Valentinovich, Mr. Kovalchuk, you are the only, scientist here from natural science. We are all economists, experts, but that's not only socialists, there are lawyers and mathematicians there among these people. But what do you think from the point of view of a person who was dealing and is dealing with development of natural science? Would expert field of Russia look like? What is it like? We regularly follow up discussions of experts from the Russian Academy of Science. To what extent is the opinion of our powerful scientists is of demand? And do you see here any progress in the recent years? Well, you know, as the previous speaker, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for organization of this discussion, and thanks for a kind invitation. And Mr. Kuzminov, the goal of the expert evaluation at the governmental level is to evaluate big, major, socially significant projects important to provide security of the whole country. And we have more and more such large-scale projects, which, on my opinion, is an important point of today. Practically every project, we mentioned the evaluation of risks, economic things, but almost all projects in either way are based on the science, because science has become the most important core part. The scientific analysis of what is proposed is very important for expert evaluation. The question is, how can we do it today? Some applicant proposes a project. It's a big project, and it is in most cases reduced to the request for money from the top managers, top leaders. And they are the experts, they guarantee that something will be included in the project which is right. And they have contact with the top leaders of the country, and they get the solution they need. But, in my opinion, this is a huge problem of our state at this stage, because there should be a filter. And entering the decision maker, the proposals should undergo serious expert evaluation, intergovernmental, supragovernmental, and interdisciplinary. This is a very important thing. I would say, well, understand, please. Today, that would be not a very good thing that I'd like to express now. But since you mentioned academy, I have to tell you, in the Soviet times, I just like to remind you, Alexander Nikolaevich knows it, and we all know, there was a very simple system. You had the Scientific Progress Commission in the Academy of Science, headed by Professor Kotelnikov, then the Science Department of Central Committee of the Communist Party, and nobody could make any decision without the opinion of this commission. Next, this commission had different groups, task forces, head institutes, among them Tsinemi Economic Institute and MIMO and other institutes were mentioned. Dozens of institutes, scientific, humanitarian and other institutions were included there. And on one hand, they prepared a forecast, what was the most important part. When you make an expert evaluation, what is important and what is lost today, you should have a system of coordinates. Apart from lobbies, interests, and their desire to get money, you should have a coordinate system. These coordinate systems are two things. First is the development strategy set by the state and embedded in the documents, for instance, scientific development strategy for the country improved by the president. And second, I think, are priorities in different areas which are also properly documented. This is the coordinate system. And when you evaluate a certain scientific proposal, any proposal which is based on science, you should be tied to this coordinate system. What happened previously? Previously, we did have these documents, and the Academy of Science Academy, but the Academy of Science don't have the institutes. This should be the Ministry of Higher Education and Science. This is a club, a community, which includes a number of experts. This is a club of people who don't work in the federal budgetary institution of the Russian Academy of Science, but who are members of a certain community. But the expert base always was belonging to different institutes. We are sitting here, if we add Moscow, St. Petersburg University, in the results you will have hundreds and thousands top experts in all areas of activities. This is a very important thing. There was a president, a vertical, had institutes, they were preparing forecasts which were discussed and presented to the government and the Central Committee, and then there were groups of experts by areas who prepared those memos, and that was the very important thing. Without it, no decision could make. What happened now? Today, since the Academy of Science changed, it's not the structure anymore, not an agency, but an association. First, it lost the access to the expert database. Secondly, it doesn't have any management vertical. And what happened? Those people who were, roughly speaking, experts, they are actually today in the market situation. If previously they were focused together and concentrated and they gave objective evaluation, today, in fact, they are just hired personnel. They're hired by those who order the expert evaluation, and in fact of objective evaluation, they give the opinion which is required by their employer. What's the important? And that's a very important, exclusively important thing and component of today's landscape, and we should take it into consideration. Now, what shall we do to overcome this? On my opinion, after the situation we had, we cannot reproduce it due to objective reason, objective situation. We should understand what to be done. So I understand it in the following way. We have to establish a very powerful scientific expertise, expert evaluation, and this expertise should be rolled out across different disciplines. Also include the natural and natural science. For example, big funds for building accelerators. These are billions of US dollars. For that, I believe we have a very unique situation right now. We have now, first, we have the Council under the President of Russian Federation for Science and Technologies. Second, we have a Presidium we have a commission for science under the government established recently by the instruction of our president. And we have also the council under the government. We have three organizations, three bodies, which are responsible for expert evaluation, and they have opportunities and administrative resources for work. As I see it, we should take those three high-level organizations, and they should find a consensus in between in order to solve how expertise and expert evaluation should be organized. And under our expert committee, there should be a task force or a working group, purely scientific, for pure scientific evaluation in the to evaluate the basis, the scientific basis of what is proposed. And it should be decided by the coordinators, the strategy of the state development on top of the priorities. And now what is also extremely important, it should exclude the duplication. If, for example, I do want to do something, you do the same, but you do your own project, you create your circle, your path, you bring it to the first top decision-making body, and afterwards it comes back and their mess starts. Governments and administration are immersed in this problem just because it was not prepared properly and it was brought to the level of their decision-making. Now I see it in the following way. It came to my mind, we have a very good system, with some reservations, but we used to have a very good system of thesis analysis. And now we still keep this system, and you will understand what I mean. So how do you prepare your thesis? What is the plus of the thesis expert evaluation? It is stage-wise, it is multi-step, it's a C. And it's a screen. And in this screen, it's written. Today we have a workshop, a laboratory workshop. You pass it. Then you go to the institute level. Then you go to the board level. In the board level, you have the pre-defense, and then opponents, head organization. And every expert that does know that a lot of experts are involved. And then it comes to the expert evaluation of RAN. You have the presidium. You have the full chain of those stages, which minimizes fake. I exclude things which happened in the 1990s. Now we restored the system. We built a new composition of this board. And this multi-stage approach is very important for our council, because subjective subjective opinion couldn't be circumvented. Expert always biased or subvented. If we want to exclude it, I think I'm speaking too long, but I'm don't to finalize that. Of course, there is a subjective factor or biasness of an expert. How can we exclude it? Obviously, it's very easy to make it public. An expert puts his name, his resume, and is responsible by his reputation. On one hand, we have expertise closed. It should be closed. It should not be public. People shouldn't know who is the expert first. But the second, if you would highlight an expert, his face, the person knowing that he is in the light, he is transparent, he will write positive opinion just for sake, not to set it up, or quasi-positive opinion. That's why I understand that the only way out to overcome this subjectivity and biasness of a specific expert in any business is to create a multi-stage system based on what. And I think it has proven that it's right. Thank you, Mr. Kovalchuk. Yes, some stage-wise approach, it should be like a regulation, imposed regulation used to get this basis, because bringing to the level of the decision, not always a president, it can be a minister who is deciding over the funds. It's not a correct thing. A question to you, Mikhail. You replaced during your career vice governors, deputy ministers of the economic development. So it means the customer of your expert. Now you are heading a big corporation, and in this company you have not only lobbying interests, but you the government, the power use you as experts. The roles changed, and how did you change the vision of the expertise? First of all, I wanted to say that among all the distinguished participants of this panel, I am, to the lesser extent in my previous career, acted as an expert. I acted rather as a client on the public side and on the business side, VTB and in Rostelecom. So my experience as a business client, I will say a few words. I believe that this is very important for a correct organization of this job in total. For me and for my colleagues from business, to be part of this board was quite unexpected. But the president, our prime minister, was absolutely clear about the goals of that, why it should be done.
He knew what had to be done to organize this large-scope work, because we had really big challenges and big goals, so 23 people were not enough for this kind of high-level goals. So we were invited, first of all, as process organizers, so that we could involve our employees from our companies, plus we could share our experience, because our experience inside the organization is even more valuable than our personal experience, probably. And now, talking about the work of our expert board, let me bring up a couple of very important aspects we really have to discuss to generate answers to the questions. And the first question is, why does the government need the expert board? What are the expectations of the government? I think the ministers and our president, they have two kinds of expectations. Number one is our answers, our expert opinion on social initiatives and projects. They want quick answers, yes or no, should we do or should we not? This is a simpler task for us. But the second expectation, I think Mr. Mishustin was meaning it when he spoke, it's looking into future. Economic, organizational, social, tax, and other aspects of future. This is what they wanted us to look into. And this already means very serious involvement of the government itself in this expert work, because if we get the questions from them, we work on them on our own, then we bring volumes of our conclusions that will not be read by anyone. No, that's not the way it's meant to be. And of course, our success of our expert board work depends very much on the involvement of the government member on a regular basis in this work, because we have to look for consensus, which means that we have to have discussions with the government on a regular basis. And like I already mentioned, our participation in this part of our work will be of top importance. And the way it will go, the success of our expert board, in which all of us are involved, will very much depend on the experts in the expert board and on the government. Okay, we have still some 10 minutes left. Oh, 22 minutes left. That's a lot. Then we have another tour of discussions, a bit different one. We were discussing what kind of expert work should we have, but the question is also, where should it be? talking about the scientific, technical policy of our country, in which areas of our national economy or industry or science, where we need expert opinion most of all, because lack of expert opinion there may be of critical importance, may be fatal. Let's talk about these fields where expert work is of utmost importance. I think this might be of more interest to our audience than what we discussed before.
Я бы сказал так.
You know,
Очень сложно.
if you take all these projects, it's not an easy question. If we take the nuclear energy industry, I spoke at our expert board in the Kremlin a few times about it. We have tactical priorities and strategic priorities. Tactical priorities are understandable, more or less. We understand the goals, we understand how to evaluate them, because these projects, they are always market-based, industry-based. That's okay. We discuss the innovation, innovative economy, and so on. But when we talk about strategic priorities, these are the priorities creating a new technological architecture of the world. And that's the most difficult part of it. Just imagine making a decision on atomic energy project. That's a very difficult thing to do. Let me give you an example. We celebrated 175 years of Kurchatov Institute. I would say that was the beginning of the nuclear energy era. And that was a cornerstone. And you know, we very successfully met this challenge. And we very well understand that if back then the right decision had not been made, we wouldn't exist as a sovereign country right now. Look at the neighbor countries like Ukraine. Here we have an answer. And the question is, how difficult was it to make this decision? What was the question, first of all? We had science. Today, you don't have to steal anything, any ideas or whatever, technologies. You take 2 pieces of uranium, and you have it all. But we got everything from our Anglo-Saxon partners. But to do something, to make the right decision, you have to have real good science. In 1918, after the revolution, at the Physical Technical Institute, we created a big scientific department. We had 30 academic institutions working on this topic. Dozens of new academic institutes were opened in 1930s, in these early Soviet years. And then we had studies on an international level. All of our Kurchatov Institute colleagues, scientists from our institute, they discovered many things for the first time in the world, like spontaneous division of uranium and other things. And there are very many famous people who were very much against this industry, saying this is not a quick thing to do. Now there will be a war. We don't need anything yet. But when Kurchatov came and said this is something really historical, really important, and then your intelligence guys come and say this same thing, and when the findings of both experts coincide, this is why it is important to have the right expert opinion. All publications on nuclear physics disappeared when this nuclear energy time started. But that's why I mean that strategic decisions are the most difficult to be made. The Germans, Brown already had rockets, they had reactors, they had heavy water, they had everything. And they didn't go further. Speer, when he became a minister, he got together all those famous Nobel Prize winners, and there was none among them thinking really far ahead, and someone who could take responsibility to suggest what could be done. Yes. They ask maybe for some amount of money to buy something, to invent something, but actually they could have done it. But this is about the role of experts in expert evaluation of what makes sense to be done and what not. And I mean that we should distinguish between tactical decisions and strategic decisions. Tactical decisions, yes, that's easier. There should be a multi-layer expert evaluation to exclude bias, but strategic decisions, this is completely different. Just a good example. For instance, equipment for the healthcare industry. This is what's linked with new materials, technologies, and so on, and development of equipment for the healthcare industry. It takes time to design it, to appraise it, and so on. And finally, now we have a program and a presidential decree signed on it. And there was a group of other guys who got some expert opinion somewhere, and they continued working something currently. And again, we need to analyze in every detail the existing expert work, the way it currently is organized, to understand how to update it, how to simplify the system. The system should be a very clear-cut, sustainable, and bulletproof. We had different periods where we had design bureaus and scientists competing, but the decision was still made at the top level. Right, when we lived in this closed system where we had the Communist Party actually ruling everything in this country, we had party leaders giving orders, setting goals, and KGB guys. The experts did not have much to say, but we know very well in the aviation industry, for instance, we created a competitive environment internally, competitive environment. We invested a lot of money in one place to produce something, and another one, and then a third one to compete with each other. And now, for instance, we have 14 or 15 institutes that produced aviation engines, and now we only have two. We have to compete now. Before we competed with each other to be better. Today we work in the open market setting. That's different, and we have to remember this, and not to be subjective, not to have the wrong lobbying. What you need to do if you want to have one engine for aircraft engine. We united all those scattered institutes, design institutes, and now we have two producers because we ourselves generated a huge number of these institutes. When for instance, talking about our Kurchatov Institute, we generated a number of such institutes when we just started making the first steps in the nuclear energy field. But now, if we have many producers producing the same aircraft or same ships or whatever, we have to think what unites them and restructure the system. You know what? We do have a really strong science in our country. It proved many times that we are able to deliver a good product, but only when we face a challenge, right? Only when we face a challenge. And in the government, very often we look at the results of science, at accounting figures, but these are not the drivers. The fact that I'm published in a scientific journal, it's about my reputation. That's but I work like in a vacuum. Our scientists need to have an environment for liaising, for sharing experience, for networking. We need to make them network with each other, to communicate with each other, to generate what the government needs now. We need their help. Absolutely. And since now we still have a few minutes left, let me start enumerating the areas where, without expert evaluation, without serious involvement of expert community, the policy can be very risky. First of all, I'm talking about the areas of politics where we face very serious external changes while we act as if nothing's changing. I think the labor market is a good example in this context. The labor market changes very swiftly. We have a very high adaptivity of population. Our population changes as workforce, changes as consumers, but this means that we need to have a completely different approach, and we have to see which jobs, which professions and specialties will be gone, which of those we have will be prevailing. I do not believe that Yandex robots will be delivering foodstuffs and whatever to the population, but they can replace maybe some lawyers or some other guys, about 15 to 20 million. All in all, people who are doing some routine things a robot can do. Well, it's like a whole car-making plants that many people, yes, and we have to reset the goals for the education, then regional development, that's a very important priority now. How can we change the current situation in which regions do not have enough money to invest, do not have much initiatives to do anything unless someone comes from Moscow or St. Petersburg or like Gazprom or someone comes and does something in their region. So the question is, how can we create an environment so that there will be some initiative and investment made from bottom up? We are very glad that we managed to stabilize the economic situation in the country, that we now don't have to borrow much money from the Ministry of Finance. But this is not a very good situation anyway. We don't have the drive. How can we change the fiscal system? How can we change the decision-making system so that they do have resource and impetus? People are everywhere able to accept something new, but we need to give them an impetus. I suggest all of you say what you think about the areas where we need to discontinue the current situation.
You outline a very wide field of discussion, and I believe at least we have three main areas. Previously I thought there are two, but now I believe there are three main areas. Very important story related to the scientific and technical expert evaluation. And I have to confess, speaking about expert evaluation, it is more social economic policy, but now this is really about science and technique. It's a very special thing, a separate thing. And we pay not enough attention, but this is important. It is important because well, in the scientific policy, there should be competition. And in the recent years, we faced the approach that budget money should be paid only to one direction. As we know, not just, well, in many key areas, in the key industries of Soviet industry and defense industry, there were chief designers who hated each other. And that's correct. Now we rather face a situation when budget money can be paid only for one project. You cannot start competitive projects, which looks strange in policy. And in the science, in the technical, if we have a lot of experts, that's going to be better and very, very good. The second area, as I believe, these are points of non-standard vision. We always live in a world where there are a lot of new challenges all the time, much more than it used to be before. And I move here rather to economical problematic. Previously, we did experience almost everything in economic policy, and within our generation, we had to solve a number of tasks we've never faced. We've never faced before in the history, in the human history. And that is also a very important thing. The readiness and the expert work should seek for points which we've never met before. It's not about the futuristic science. It's about real science, and this is a very important sphere. It's very important to deal with the trend-breaking problem. The previous decade, we discussed new normality. There will be no inflation, and those who said there could be a stagflation, just wait, they also were partially right. And one of the academicians, when he tried to say that what happens if the oil price go down, they laughed at him. Will people be tanked with mineral water? It won't happen. Now we know it already, but previously they've never met it before 1986. The oil price was only growing or was flat, plateau or growth, and no other option. And nobody was ready for the fact that it could drop not by 1%, by the order of magnitude. And looking for points which we've never been before. Well, but it can happen. This is a very important task for the expert board. Thank you, Mikhail. I wanted to develop your point, Mr. Mao. This is related to our future organizational model, placing and distributing the population. People go to cities. It happens all over the world. We live in the Renaissance era when cities were growing. And people, tradesmen, craftsmen, bankers, they appeared in cities. This is an objective situation. People move not only from villages, but from small settlements also, from small towns. And we can see it on our clients and employees. This is a reality which we do not take into account in full when building up our programs, development of infrastructure and economics. And we should mean it also. And the huge gap in the budget supply. This situation is crying. It's over mature. And it is very sharp now in pandemic period. The person cannot depend on where he was born. It is written in the Constitution that everyone is equal. Everyone has equal rights. If you want my expert opinion, for sure we have to change the taxation distribution system, and we should make healthcare, education, and basic things more or less equal for the whole territory of our country. Thank you, Mr. Shokhin. I think that, yes, indeed, we have to be prepared for challenges, and the expert evaluation should show the development. And if expert evaluation insists on one opinion, this is a bad expert evaluation. There should be different consequences or sequence of different expert evaluations, whether social or taxation. If we think on substance, there's a big request for social equality. The equality, we see the outbursts of dissatisfaction can happen in different countries, different regions. For example, digital inequality, inequality in incomes, inequality in access to culture due to it's not always where you live, where you're born. Well, I think to show what happens if we don't do such things, the different development, negative crisis variants, not only inertial ones, which most probably are assumed, and on top of that, also the combination technical and financial economic expertise, like we prepared a project of VCM, a high-speed road Moscow-Kazan without economics. But now we put it on hold with the design documents and the development of Moscow-St. Petersburg of this project. This, well, is put a barrier on the way of technological decisions and solutions for this high-speed road. It's like, well, we should need at least one road, and we should build it. It's a very important thing. It's not just a branch. It is, well, we just forgot that politics and the state have not only economic growth tasks. They have tasks to provide social stability. Sometimes it's priority. The state also has a task to support and maintain technological progress and provide our place in the global technological division. It means that we have to have such economic policy which will be aimed at technological promotion and incentivizing of our industrial enterprises, because they also develop the progress and the development. I would add here geopolitics. Geopolitical situation is there, it is present, and such a comprehensive vision of the state's tasks should be part and parcel of strategic planning, not at the words level, but at the technology level. But at the technology level, we have only the first. We only have economic growth tasks, and that's it. That's why I believe that our global goal, our global task is to set absolutely new framework to evaluate the activities and proposals of the government. Can I ask a question? Unlike you, I'm not a businessman or economist, and I always was staggered by GDP evaluation. The GDP growth is an absolute extensive thing. The extensive thing of evaluating economy. We should think globally about it. There's a good paradox of Samuelson when the man marries a maid because, and in this case, he reduces the GDP because he stops buying her services. Well, you understand it. That's what I meant. It depends on the attitude of the maid, of the housewife. Probably he will increase the GDP when she will stop servicing him. Okay, colleagues, I believe that was a very interesting talk. It gives me more optimism, gives me more optimistic. Now we start the new year, and I think that in January we already have to structure our work, and we just have to begin. We have to start. Your colleagues in the government should start it. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. It was really interesting. Goodbye.